Now the question arrives, was I a rebellious kid? I think like any child, any kid that went through some of the things that I went through is going to have a situation where, yeah, you're going to get yourself in some trouble. And like most kids, I did some things that, had some negative results, if you will. I was mischievous. Because of the situation and how I was brought up, living at one time in the Bahamas and then at another time in America. Like I said before, we would be back and forth between the United States and the islands of the Bahamas, where my grandparents, my mother's parents, are from. And there was one particular year, I think the year was 1997, or 98, my mom decided that she was going to leave me in the Bahamas with my grandparents. Her, my dad, and my sisters traveled on back to the U.S. To be more specific, they traveled to Dallas. And when I say my mom decided to leave me, I pretty much begged my mom if I could stay in the Bahamas with my grandfather and grandmother. My grandfather was really, truly my father figure. In terms of me learning social skills, learning how to deal with people, seeing what kindness was like tangibly. I learned that all from him, watching him. He was a people's person. He never met strangers. This brother would walk into a room and people would light up when they saw him because he would light up when he saw other people. He would engage them. He'd always have candies and sweets and things like that to give as gifts. Everybody loved Percy Miller. Well, anyway, I stayed in the Bahamas. And around this time in 97, I'm 14? I remember my grandmother drove a Jetta, Volkswagen Jetta. I think the year of that Jetta was a 95 model. In fact, that car is still running to this day. The year now when I'm recording this is 2022. So one particular evening, my grandmother is on her way to Wednesday night prayer meeting. I mean, every day that the doors of that church opened, she was there. And here was an opportunity for me to be a bit mischievous because she caught a ride with a dear friend of hers by the name of Sister Culmer. Sister Culmer came, picked her up, and my grandmother made the mistake of leaving the keys to that 1995 Jetta at the house. And I'm there by myself. Remember now, we were all living in my grandparents' house, and my mom, my dad, and all four of my sisters had left and moved back to Texas. So I was in Nassau, Bahamas by myself. My grandfather's a cab driver, so he was out that night at his church making his rounds. So I was home alone. And I remember I found the keys to the Jetta, the Volkswagen Jetta. And I had a cousin up the street. His name was Delano. And I remember I ran over to his house. I mean, literally, he was maybe 2 blocks away, if that. And I'm like, yo, I got the keys to my grandmother's whip. And he and I and 2 other friends of ours walked back to my house, my grandparents' house. And we hopped into that Volkswagen Jetta. And I remember we drove around maybe for 30 minutes or so. I didn't want to get too beside myself. I was already doing an illegal procedure. I didn't want to make it even worse and multiply the punishment had I got caught or gotten a wreck. Because Lord knows if I had gotten into a wreck in that car on that particular night, oh man, it wouldn't have been nice for my backside. Let me just put it like that. But I did go out, take the car, and made it back safely. Me, my cousin, and 2 of our friends. About 30 minutes later, my grandmother never knew about it. No one ever knew. Like I said, my grandfather was at church as well. My parents and my sisters were all the way overseas in the U.S. So I was able to have a little fun that particular night. And I remember I started doing things like that a little more and more, taking advantage of the fact that my grandparents were up in age and that they weren't able to keep up with me as a 14-year-old getting into trouble. I remember my grandmother would hide money in different places of the house. And one particular place she would hide money was in the telephone book. Now, how many of you remember the telephone book? We hadn't had that in years. Now we've got Google, or we can just ask Siri on our phones for the numbers to something that we need to locate or identify. But back in those days, in the 90s, when I was a youngin', we had the telephone book, and she would hide money in the telephone book. And one particular evening, I'm just being mischievous, looking around. Again, my parents are in America, and I find $50 inside the phone book. For those of you that are watching back home in the Bahamas, you remember the Batelco phone books. Batelco is the phone company in the Bahamas, and they had these big, thick phone books, much like the Yellow Pages here in the U.S., where my grandmother had hidden $50, a $50 bill in that book, and I remember finding it. I was, I'd say maybe in the 6th or 7th grade at this time. And I took that money, I cashed it in. I was like, yo, I'm gonna do me. I went to school. I was attending a school at the time in the Bahamas that goes by the name of Bahamas Academy. It's a Seventh-day Adventist run academy. So it was not your typical government school. I had to wear a uniform, black khakis and a white shirt. And oh man, I was quite the embarrassment. My aunt was a teacher there, the home economics teacher. And in fact, my grandmother was a teacher herself, but not on that campus. I was expected to do well. And again, because of so much of what I dealt with as a young person, so much of the stress that I encountered and the issues that I had to deal with, the emotional stress of moving up and down, back and forth, having the issues with my dad, etc., etc. These things did not allow for me to settle into my schoolwork. I did not care about schoolwork. My biggest concern was usually social issues. Who liked me? Who didn't? Am I going to be comfortable in this situation that we find ourselves in? How's this gonna work? How's that gonna work? Why are we moving? You know, those were the things that paraded the forefront of my mind. Well, I took this $50 to school that day, Bahamas Academy, and right there on that campus, I should say on the outskirts of the campus, right near the playground area, there was a little storefront. Now, I've got to explain this to you. Unless you live in New York or a big city, most of you aren't familiar with these little storefronts, mom and pop shops that sell everything out of them, from bread to milk, cologne, perfume, these different little knickknacks. And that was the kind of place that this particular joint was. And we would, as the kids of the school, we would sneak over there through a little fence that was busted open during the school hours. And we would go to this little store if we had monies, and we'd buy stuff, gum, little action figurines, different toys, water guns, playful stuff that, you know, we were kids that we played with. Well, this particular day I was balling. Hey, I got $50, so I'm gonna go all out. And I remember I went and I bought a bottle of cologne. Now, what am I at about 12 or 13 years old? What am I gonna do with a bottle of cologne? I guess I felt that I needed to smell good. I need to spruce myself a little bit for the girls, for the ladies in class, because I was fat, I was chubby. A lot of the girls didn't like me because of it.
Just don't know